This week, we respond to questions about our recent coverage of Tesla Autopilot. We share our test results from the 2021 Toyota Highlander Hybrid and answer a question we've been getting more and more these days. How can you test drive a Kia Telluride if no dealerships have them in stock? All that and more, next on Talking Cars. Hey, welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Mike Quincy.
And I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
So sometimes Consumer Reports and Talking Cars covers the news. Sometimes we are the news. In this case, we had a lot of questions about our coverage of the aftermath of a tragic crash in Houston, in which 2 people died in a Tesla, and there was speculation that no one was behind the wheel in that vehicle. There was a lot of talk on social media, on the internet. A lot of people were speculating, making assumptions about whether autopilot was active, what autopilot could even do, whether it was even possible to get a vehicle moving like this. And, we have a test track, we have a Tesla. So we put some of those claims that we saw online to the test. They were not an investigation of the crash. We're not speculating on what caused the crash, but we wanted to answer some questions that our viewers, our readers, and other folks out there had. So I talked to Jake Fisher a little earlier to find out more about some of what we were able to do at CR.
Well, the truth is I really can't tell you exactly what happened in that crash. And, I'm not going to speculate on what happened in that crash. And I can't imagine. What was interesting, though, is that when the police reported that there was no one in the driver's seat, there was a lot of questions about whether or not that's even possible.
Yeah, I think one of the first mentions that we saw of that was online. It was a tweet where someone said, and there was a ton of conversation about this. And of course, we reached out to Tesla, and they didn't respond as their press department appears to have been dissolved. The tweet that it comes the closest to an official response from Tesla is one that Tesla CEO Elon Musk responded to. And that tweet was, this doesn't make sense. There are safety measures in place where the autopilot seat is weighted to make sure there is a driver. Hands must be on steering wheel every 10 seconds or it disengages. Autopilot doesn't go over the speed limits. Over limit is impossible. Research, please. And Elon Musk responded to that. Your research as a private individual is better than professionals at Wall Street Journal. Data logs recovered so far show autopilot was not enabled and this car did not purchase full self-driving. There was something in that tweet that you kind of honed in on, right, Jake?
Yeah, that's right. Look, I couldn't tell you whether or not autopilot was engaged in this particular crash, but I thought it was really interesting when they talked about what was required to actually engage autopilot. I heard, that that weight had to be on the seat, that hands need to be on the steering wheel and all those things. So we decided we'd actually just try it out and see if it was actually impossible or not. And that's when, because we do have a Tesla and because we do have a closed track with a controlled situation where we could try it. Please do not try this at home. This would be idiotic to try to do this at home or on the road because you would put yourself at risk or others at risk. I was curious, was that true? We decided to do this experiment. Take a look at this video and you can see what happened. So the first thing I did was I took this car to about 15 miles per hour, engaged autopilot, and then changed the set speed back down to 0, which stopped the vehicle, but autopilot still remained engaged. If your hands are off the wheel, it could also stop autopilot, but I put a small weight on the left side of the steering wheel that wasn't enough to turn the wheel, but just enough to put some resistance there. At this point, I was able to get myself completely out of the driver's seat with the seatbelt still plugged in, and autopilot still stayed engaged. In the passenger seat, I was able to increase the set speed by turning the wheel on the steering wheel. And at this point, it was completely driving on autopilot with no one in the driver's seat. I kept my foot near the brake pedal just in case, but there were people standing by and we were in a closed facility. The car continued to follow the lines on the test track. There were no warnings that no one was sitting in the seat, no one was holding the steering wheel, and no one was looking at the road. So as you just saw in the video, it turns out you don't have to have weight on the seat. I actually honestly was surprised. I figured that I know there's a weight sensor in the seat. I figured you'd have to do that. Really makes triggering out the system very difficult if you had to do that. But no, we were able to get the vehicle to drive down our track on autopilot without that. It is true that you do need to have, well, it's not totally true. You need to have hands on the steering wheel. You just need to have some kind of a weight on the steering wheel, honestly. And that's not difficult. I think anyone who knows, who has this car or drives autopilot realizes you just need to kind of just put a little bit of weight on the steering wheel, and that defeats that device.
So we published that article, and we certainly got some responses, and we want to respond to a lot of them. So the first one, Elon Musk will probably fix this with an over-the-air update. He was a little busy the last couple days launching 4 astronauts into space.
Very true. He was very, very busy.
He is a very busy man.
He is a very busy man.
No one can dispute that. Yeah.
I was following the launch, and that was exciting to watch for sure. But it is very interesting. Over-the-air updates are totally possible in this vehicle. Before we have notified Tesla of issues with the vehicle that they were able to update over-the-air updates. And that is certainly a possibility. I actually don't disagree with this one.
Yeah. In some ways, we kind of hope that's going to happen. That there is a seat sensor that is built into there that's used for airbags and for seat belts. And if that seat sensor, just a couple of lines of code probably, would be able to change it so as to turn off the ability to use autopilot if no one was in the driver's seat, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no saving people from doing really stupid things. You can't idiot-proof the world, that's for sure. But it does seem like a pretty easy change. And, I just want to kind of reiterate that, the purpose of what we did wasn't to stop people from doing dumb things. I mean, that will happen. But I think in the end, really what we found out was just it needs better driver monitoring, because if the driver monitoring system can't determine really if someone's at the passenger seat or the driver's seat of the passenger seat, it's not going to be able to determine if somebody's paying attention.
So the next question, autopilot, the phrase, not necessarily the exact technology, comes directly from airplanes. Do people think that airplanes don't have pilots anymore because of autopilot? Full self-driving literally states that it's not available yet. And lastly, it's not Tesla that advertises their cars as self-driving cars, and never has. And then they attached an ad it was an older Mercedes ad that says introducing a self-driving car from a very self-driven company. And I remember the controversy around this ad, because there were not self-driving cars, and it also was an implication. Yeah.
I mean, actually, that Mercedes-Benz ad we took issue with. It said your full self-driving Mercedes-Benz has arrived. We drove that car, said it's clearly not full driving. And actually, we wrote and contacted the FTC about that, because it really was false advertising. And Mercedes-Benz actually was pretty quick to react and change the ad and no longer introduce their vehicles as full self-driving. Or self-driving, as it was in the ad. But that there's a lot to unpack in that tweet for sure. It's interesting. I mean, words do matter. Words mean different things to different people. Autopilot, if you really get down to the details of it, actually, it's true. A airplane that has autopilots, you still need a pilot. The pilot is still in control. But certainly there's confusion. Look, there's been so many things written about Teslas being self-driving. And there's a lot of confusion from not just that point. I mean, look, even if you want to use the word autopilot, I mean, keep in mind, there's also a co-pilot. There's also someone else usually making sure that you're paying attention. And also the amount of training that is required to fly an airplane is a whole lot more. So monitoring the autopilot and all that is one piece of that. But it doesn't end in autopilot. We purchased in our car the full self-driving capability, is a feature that they charge for on Teslas. It's a $10,000 option, full self-driving capability. That does seem confusing. I know in the small print, I mean, as the person who tweeted kind of says, in the small print, full self-driving doesn't mean full self-driving. But sometimes that's missed.
The next question. Can you please share studies you have conducted to conclude camera-based approach is better to monitor for drivers' attention? Have you tested the following with GM and or Ford? Sunglasses, nighttime and or darkness, using pictures. So I know we mentioned Super Cruise a lot, GM Super Cruise. So far it was only available on one vehicle, but we just got a new vehicle in that has it. And GM Super Cruise is also something we talk about a lot just because it's one of the only other systems out there that has this level of capability, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have used Super Cruise quite a bit in the past. Many of us, I've personally driven it with sunglasses. I've driven it at night. I've used it in all different types of situations, and it does work. It's not just, and we talk about camera-based systems. It's not just a camera. It has infrared capabilities, so it can actually see through sunglasses that are dark. And it works quite well. And we actually have done many studies, and we're actually part of a consortium out of MIT where we're studying people using these systems, and they're quite robust.
Yeah, and there are also third-party studies too that are being done at various schools, at Duke, at Carnegie Mellon. As far as things like Blue Cruise, which is going to be Ford's system, I know a lot of people asked why are we talking about GM and Ford? GM Super Cruise, it's one of the first other really robust systems out there. Ford Blue Cruise, as soon as we get a vehicle that has that, we're certainly going to add that to our ongoing testing, right? We have this ongoing testing of all of these driver assistance systems.
That's right. Yeah, I mean we're in a position where we get the brand new vehicles as soon as they come out, and we will be experiencing and writing about them.
Our next question. How about owner satisfaction of Tesla's autopilot versus other driver assist systems? Why don't you show this data? You guys usually try to focus on the data, but in this case, it seems like subjectivity and opinion have won out.
That's an interesting question, because really, we're coming from, a data standpoint, making these claims that looking where you're going is better than not looking where you're going, even if your hands are on the wheel. But satisfaction is subjective. Satisfaction data, we do have satisfaction data, and I actually could talk about that a little bit. When we ask about satisfaction with things like auto steer, which is part of the autopilot, it's very, very high satisfaction. That doesn't necessarily mean it's safer. It means people like it. I mean, I'm sure satisfaction with ice cream is better than satisfaction with carrots. Doesn't mean it's healthier. But when we do ask things about, have you ever felt unsafe because of auto steer compared to other like systems for other vehicles? People actually tell us that Teslas, they are more likely to feel unsafe with it. So, there's a lot to unpack on that.
And our next question. Consumer Reports no longer takes ad money, so who pays them to run their business? Consumer Reports is organized as a nonprofit. Of its 6 largest philanthropic partners, number 1, Ford, number 3, GM, number 6, Big Oil.
Wow.
There are some inaccuracies. Inaccuracies in here.
I think it's, mostly inaccuracies. I mean, I can even start with, we no longer take ads. We've never taken ads. But that list is just plainly wrong. It's true, we are a nonprofit organization. We do get grants from large institutions and foundations to support consumers. I can assure you we do not take any donations from any companies of products that we test or oil companies. It's just simply not true.
I think they're talking about, Ford, the Ford Foundation. GM, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Big Oil being the Energy Foundation. But there are differences between these foundations and philanthropic partners and being paid directly by a manufacturer.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of invite anyone to kind of go onto Wikipedia and learn a little bit about these foundations, and you'll quickly learn that the Ford Foundation is not the Ford Motor Company. Yeah.
So, Jake, thanks so much for staying on Twitter all weekend. And we're glad that we can get a chance to answer some of these questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some good questions there, and I'm happy to answer them.
So we hope that clarifies whether your question was sent with kindness or a little bit less than kindness. But if you're interested, it's a very controversial topic, and the story is developing and ongoing. We've got more coverage at cr.org, and you can find out that things like driver monitoring, things like ensuring that a driver is in charge of a vehicle, are so important that lawmakers are starting to take notice. So you can learn more about that, read some articles over at cr.org. And back to something a little less groundbreaking. In fact, one of the least groundbreaking vehicles we've ever driven. And that's not an insult. That's the point. The Highlander Hybrid, the Toyota Highlander Hybrid. What do you folks think? We purchased our own XLE. It's a 2020, 243 horsepower, 2.5 liter four-cylinder hybrid drivetrain, continuously variable transmission, all-wheel drive, no major options, but it's pretty well appointed. About $44,400. Fuel economy. That's the big story here. Mid-30s miles per gallon. Fuel economy is really incredible for its class, right? Mike, you've spent some time with this vehicle, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, it is getting the hybrid version of the Highlander assures buyers that they're definitely getting a bump up from the standard Highlander, which also did well in Consumer Reports testing. I love the fuel economy. I love the cruising range. I love the fact that Toyota has, kind of co-developed hybrid technology about alongside Honda back in like 1999, I believe they debuted, and they've stuck with it. And so you got to give Toyota some props for making this technology as good as it can be. It's super reliable. I love the standard safety features. The hybrid version gets standard blind spot. It's comfortable. It's quiet. And it is one of the most uninspiring cars I've driven recently. Listen, it's like the perfect family car for people who are not really interested in driving. It's pretty boring. It's functional, but it's pretty boring.
Yeah, Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's funny. I had very similar thoughts to Mike in that this is a vehicle that is more about function than driving dynamics. And don't get me wrong, it functions very well. It is a fantastic family car. In this iteration, as typical of Toyota, evolutionary, not revolutionary. They tend to just incrementally improve. If you've had a Highlander or are happy with how a Highlander has driven in the past, you'll be very happy with this car. Improvements, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all the standard safety. And that's why their reliability is so great, because they just incrementally improve their vehicles. One thing I will say is that the fuel economy, particularly if you're like a city stop and go, I think of parents that might be dropping off kids, it really excels in city in terms of fuel economy. That's where the big gains are. So if you're not one that's, taking long highway trips, that really may be an advantage for you. The other thing is that the hybrid in our testing had some notably longer braking distances. And we've seen that on other vehicles as well. The braking distance is not dangerous, don't get me wrong, but more in the realm of a Ram 1500 pickup than many of the, say, more grippy SUVs out there. So that was one thing that hurt the hybrid's overall score versus the regular V6. I do prefer the V6 in terms of driving dynamics. This is somewhat of a soft vehicle. When you pick up the speed or get in a curve, you're going to know that there's some body roll there. I think back, my kids, when they were little, used to call them sick cars that were a bit more floaty and had a bit more body roll. And I will say most of them have improved. They would say to me, Mom, this is a sick car.
And they don't mean like, oh, that's a sick car.
Yeah,
no,
not
that's
sick
the
car.
difference. Yeah.
But I think the Toyota Highlander Hybrid might be judged a sick car by my younger versions of my children. But totally functional. It is a fantastic family car, bulletproof reliability, all of that. Nobody has done hybrids for longer than Toyota. So I think you just have to drive it and see if it's to your liking. But a great car for sure.
Yeah, we've got a ton of Toyota hybrids in the family, in the extended family. I actually used this car when I was moving, and that third row folded down. The third row is pretty tight. It's good in a pinch, as most third rows are in everything but full size SUVs. But I was able to fit a decent amount of boxes in there, and I appreciated going back and forth from a storage unit and going back and forth, Connecticut to Boston on 95. It was fine. The engine noise was about the only thing that I did notice. And I think that kind of made me feel like the car was struggling more than it was. It sounded, when it was fully loaded with a ton of boxes and I would hit that gas pedal. As soon as it went from electric acceleration to the gas engine kicking in, that handoff, it kind of gives you that feeling of, oh, something's up here. The car is working hard, and that took away for me from the pleasure of it. But I'm a big hybrid proponent as well. I think if you're not driving a sports car, if you're driving a car for its practicality, why not get the most fuel efficient car you can buy?
I agree, Keith. I am also a big fan of Toyota hybrids, and I would say that if our viewers, our audience out there is interested in a Highlander, but you're more interested in some kind of more engaging driving, I would check out the XSE version of the Highlander. I mean, you're giving up several miles per gallon, but Toyota really goes the extra mile when they slap the XSE line on a lot of their products. The Avalon, the Camry, the Corolla versions are usually a pretty big step up when it comes to steering response and handling. It's a little bit more money than our tested hybrid version, but I've been really impressed with all the XSE versions of Toyotas that I've driven, and I would definitely check that one out. It also kind of has really cool looking wheels too.
So there you have it. You'll be the coolest 3-row hybrid SUV driver on the block.
It doesn't actually make it sick, but
Well, if you want to learn more, I know that this is the Highlander Hybrid is very popular among our members. So they can log on to cr.org and learn a ton more about this vehicle. And all the numbers, all the stats, they're all there at cr.org. So before we move on, we just wanted to let you know about the Talking Cars donation program. So CR is a nonprofit. That means that all the work that we do is funded by memberships and donations. And if you're able to give, it really helps us keep doing the work we do. And some of that work includes the show, which is why you won't hear Jen talking for 30 minutes about a new mail order mattress, like some other podcasts out there. Or Mike Quincy talking about the new. Well, actually, you don't shave anymore, so we couldn't talk about that.
Well, I trim it a little bit.
Oh, well, either way, if you're able to give, it really helps. It keeps us from having to do stuff like that. And you can find more information at cr.org/give talking cars. cr.org/give talking cars. Now on to some audience questions. Which came to us via talkingcars@icloud.com. Unfortunately, no video questions this week, but send them along. We love video questions. But our first question comes from Appleton, Wisconsin, from Christopher, who says, my wife and I are getting ready to purchase a new family car. Through hours of research, we compiled a list that included the Kia Telluride. So I think everyone can kind of see where this is going. The problem is that when we showed up to the Kia dealer, there weren't any Tellurides in stock. When talking to the Kia dealer, they pointed out that even if a vehicle is listed in the dealership's inventory, it doesn't necessarily mean the car is on the lot. And from looking at Kia's inventory, it doesn't seem like there's a single Telluride or its cousin, the Hyundai Palisade, within 50 miles of us. How can we schedule a test drive of a Telluride if we can't actually find one in stock? Since it's so highly rated by CR, should we just order one and hope we like it? So let's take a little step back. This is a question I got from actually even people from within CR and other departments on our internal messaging service the other day. Someone said, I'm trying to buy a Telluride and I can't find one. What's going on? And what's going on is, these are incredibly popular cars. Kia and Hyundai with the Palisade have a real hit on their hands. They are underpriced for what they are. There's an article on cr.org that compares it with much more expensive luxury SUVs. So and very favorably. The Telluride, though, like all vehicles, is subject to some of the supply shortages that we have. There's a microchip shortage that's going on. And basically it means that automakers are only using the limited supply of chips they have in the most profitable vehicles possible. So they are selling fully loaded versions of vehicles. You're not going to find a base version of a car. And these Tellurides, when they are released from inventory, not even when they're on the dealership stock, but when they get the order for them, they're being sold. And we get this, Mike Quincy, you get this when you bought a lot of cars for us. You get this when you'll call a dealer and you'll see it's on their website and they'll say, oh, that car's actually on the truck, right?
Right. So whether you're using some of the more popular new car websites, which I guess I'm not going to mention right now, or you go to the actual dealer's own website and you see a picture of, let's say, a Telluride, but it's clearly what they call a stock image. It's a picture that the Kia company makes available to retailers and whatnot. And there's no like detailed shots of the interior. There's no, out of focus shots or anything. That's a good indication that the car is not on the ground, or it's an indication that the dealer is kind of lazy and they just can't be bothered with taking a picture. So when I was trying to buy our Cadillac Escalade, for example, it was it's really, really hot, and I would see kind of these stock images of seemingly available cars, and of course they're either not there or they're already sold. I mean, the Kia is kind of a victim of Consumer Reports publishing in that we say the Telluride is really great, and now everyone wants one.
Yeah, I would say, some actual advice for you. You're probably going to have to travel to get this car. I would also say that and this is advice I don't usually give, you might actually want to put down a deposit and a refundable deposit. Make sure you get it in writing. And that way you get this sort of first crack at the next one that comes off the truck. Then you go, you drive it, and if you can't negotiate the right price, make sure that deposit is on your credit card. So if the dealer doesn't give you back your deposit, you can take it up with your credit card company. But get that deposit refunded if you don't decide to take the car. But you probably will take the car, and you can apply that deposit to the cost of the vehicle. But shop around, because dealers are marking up these vehicles with extra on MSRP.
This is what I was going to say, that all of those things combined, the high-end chip, the lack of inventory, and the popularity of this car probably means you're going to pay more than you really want to. And my advice for Christopher, and he didn't share his timing of how quickly he needs this car, if your heart is set on the Telluride or the Palisade, I would wait. I would wait a little bit. And if you need this vehicle right away, or a vehicle right away, I actually said I would consider some alternatives. So, for example, my favorite, the Kia Sorento, not much smaller, obviously not the cargo room, but look into the Sorento, look at the Highlander Hybrid or not, as we just talked about, look at the Mazda CX-9. The popularity is not going to be in your favor financially or economically. So I would look perhaps at something else if this is a vehicle you need soon.
Yeah, and one thing that I was reflecting on, Keith, part of the question where they said, should I just buy one? Should I just buy it anyway? And I don't think that's good advice. I don't think people, even a top-rated car from Consumer Reports, I don't think anyone should just blindly put their faith in it, because every body is different. Every seat is different. Every sight line is different. So I would caution against just jumping in and getting one without trying it.
Yeah. So from the most popular vehicles today to the most popular vehicles of the era when Jen's background was made there. Paul asks us, could car manufacturers build and sell a new Model T for the same price it was sold for in 1925. According to Wikipedia, the 1925 Model T sold for $260, which equals $3,790 in today's dollars. Jen, what do you think?
So just to clarify, this is supposed to be the 1700s, not the 1900s.
Okay.
Come on, Keith. So I did a little research, and my So the Tin Lizzie, as they called the Model T, was produced between 1908 and 1927. And it was the first, for those of you with a little history, it was the first mass-produced production line vehicle, which made it a reasonably priced vehicle for the middle class. That was the whole premise of the Model T. But to answer the question for Paul, I don't think we would want the Model T, even if it could be available at today's prices. So it's funny, you talk horses. The Model T, when it was introduced, literally shared the road still at that time with horses. Not my horses that I can see out my window. But yeah, so it was really called the horseless carriage, and because that's what it was. It didn't have, so to bring that to today's market, it didn't have many of the things we would need to share the road with other vehicles, and nor would you want to. So it had 177 cubic inch, 2.9 liter. I was like, that's pretty large displacement.
Yeah, that's bigger than most vehicles today.
Yes, inline four, and it produced 20 horsepower, 20, with a top speed of 45 miles per hour. So you bring that technology. I thought it was a funny story. To put it in perspective, the 2008 Smart for 2 that we tested was a 71 horsepower, 1 liter, 3-cylinder, had a base price of $13,000, just to put that. And it was one of the slowest vehicles we've ever tested. We literally put the Smart for 2 in a foot race against Ryan Pizlikowski, and the Smart for 2 lost.
Yeah,
So
I was in that race too. I remember that.
So unless you had a Model T brought up technology-wise to a point where it can share the roads with today's vehicles, which is, literally hundreds of years different, it would not compete. So it has to be brought up, not just by price, but tons of technology. We talk about it in reading the history. It came with its own toolkit. Not a very good sign for reliability either. So, and you had to get out and crank it to start it. Electric start was not available till 1919. So again, to bring a Model T to today's technology is more than just dollars. And I'm not sure we would want a Model T, though I love seeing them.
So the question actually had me thinking, what is the least expensive new car available in the United States right now? I did a little research, and I found that Chevrolet still has the 2020 Spark on their website that you can configure and buy new. And an LS with a 5-speed manual transmission comes in at $12,145. That's the newest, that's the least expensive new car that I could find. And just this whole thing reminded me of my wife's first new car, which was a 1993 Toyota Tercel. I believe Anatoly the Great has a picture of her and her new car. It was a 4-speed manual, 82 horsepower, vinyl seats, no right side exterior mirror. I mean, they did everything they could to make this inexpensive. No anti-lock brakes, no stability control, just a driver's side airbag. The only option that she put on it was air conditioning. We put our own radio into it later, and it cost about $7,000. So we're going from 1993 to 2021, where about $7,000 would get you a decent new car, and now it's over $12,000.
Yeah. Well, from the past to the present and future, James asks us, with so many car manufacturers putting LED daytime running lights on their cars, I wonder, once the LEDs burn out, can just the daytime running light portion be replaced, or does the whole headlight assembly have to get changed too? That sounds like a question for Jen.
Yeah, so this is the whole glory of LEDs are that they're very low power consumption. They run, they don't dissipate a lot of heat, so they're cooler running. And with that, they are touted as having a much longer life. And many will say that LEDs should last the lifetime of the car. So that concern is far less than it would be, to Mike's point with his Tercel, of changing out the halogen bulbs, which are inexpensive, but fail far more frequently. So with that said, to answer his question, it's going to depend on the design. We see some very, very complicated arrays of LEDs. I think of Volvo's Thor's Hammer DRL that are integrated very much and are a number of LEDs in that array to create that kind of styling. And then we see some very simple ones where it's like a single LED behind a lens that is the DRL. So I think that is going to depend on the design. Hopefully we don't have to do that very often. And the other place you're going to see it is, depending on the design, if there is a crash or a fender bender where the headlights are damaged, is what's that replacement cost for a Thor's hammer versus a very simple DRL that has maybe a few LEDs behind a lens. Again, that would be covered hopefully with insurance, but it's going to depend, and hopefully we don't have to answer this question because their longevity takes care of that.
Mm-hmm. And for the record, and as every Volvo press release, it seems, will remind you, the lights are actually called Thor's hammer. They're designed to be some Norse mythology and really hammer in that Swedish thing, no pun intended. Jaguar, and it has the cat's claws. There's all kinds of.
Acura has the jewel eye.
Boy.
Yes,
jewel
there's
eye.
lots of great names.
This is why the press releases you really miss out when you don't read those sometimes. That marketing language is really something else.
I have quite a crush on Chris Helmsworth too.
I was gonna wait before that came out. It's like somebody's got to say, they're gonna put the hammer down, or boy, this is a bright idea.
Here he comes with the dad jokes.
Moving on. To a dad question from Jerry from Harlem, who says, I drive my daughter to school every day, about 4 miles each way, with lots of stopping and going, as you'd expect in a city. Which maintenance schedule should I follow? Miles driven or months elapsed? We only drive short distances daily, with occasional 100-plus mile trips upstate. Mike, you did some digging into this, right?
Yes, and I will say to Jerry, short trips are hard on cars. 4-mile trips every day would be considered severe duty. It's funny because I didn't think that. I thought, severe duty, you've got pickup trucks out in the desert and hauling heavy loads and stuff like that. But our chief mechanics here at the track assured me that no, short trips are severe duty. I mean,
severe duty, that's that phrase that you see in the owner's manual and you think it means like you're out in the desert
towing
somewhere. Yeah, or towing, exactly. But yeah.
No, Keith, that's a really good point. Our advice has always been that even if you don't drive a lot of miles per year, you should still be getting your oil change probably twice a year. I mean, a direct quote from our mechanic is, if you make a lot of short trips, standard motor oil may never get warm enough to burn off the moisture and impurities, which mean it may not be doing enough to protect your engine. So I would very seriously consider looking in your owner's manual, just like Keith said, and look up the severe duty maintenance schedule, and I would follow that.
Another point for Jerry is very similar to what we've been saying to people with cars that have been sitting during, COVID and the pandemic is, Jerry, you might want to take some just rides. Get that car, get it out on the highway, get that oil heated up. Maybe once a week, you just take a ride, and you could get yourself kind of out of that severe duty by getting that engine warmed up and kind of using it at a higher speed a little bit as well. So that certainly could be helpful for the longevity of that car.
I mean, back in the days of carburetors, didn't they used to say you got to blow out the carbons?
Yes.
In this case, it's pay that $14 toll over the Henry Hudson Bridge and
right,
get that car going, get it going. All right, and our last question comes from Christine from Laguna Hills, California, who says, I recently bought my first hybrid vehicle, a 2019 Ford Fusion SE. I really love the smoothness and how it climbs hills, increasing or decreasing revs with no shifting. But when I watch car videos, I hear people say it's a hybrid, so it has a CVT or something similar. Does a hybrid have a belt and pulley CVT transmission? Does my car use some type of gears and a computer to drive the wheels by the electric motor or the gas engine, or maybe both? What makes my car go? Christine, you're like almost there. You're
Yeah.
You really, if you hadn't asked what makes my car go at the end, you were like really, really close. And I gotta say, I'm on team CVT. I know this is not a popular, you go onto, car social media, or you go to enthusiast websites and, well, there's a CVT and it has and we talk like John Wayne and it has a CVT and it drones. And okay, some of the early Nissan CVTs had some reliability issues. But other than that, I see nothing wrong with a transmission that has essentially an infinite number of gears. You see all these automakers going 8-speed, 9-speed, 10-speed. What about an infinite speed? And so I don't hate CVTs. I don't hate them. I'm living in the future. I'm not living in the past. Mike, what do you looked a little into the actual explanation answering Christine's actual question.
Right. Well, yeah, and well, from infinity to beyond. In the Fusion, the hybrid electric motor and the gas motor work together to transfer power to a CVT. And the CVT has two variable pulleys that can constantly change the gear ratio for your vehicle. And again, this is coming directly from our super smart mechanics here at the track. I mean, Keith, you kind of summed up the benefits of the CVT. I mean, they always seem to be in the right gear. They're smaller, they're lighter, they're designed to save gas in many ways. And as you mentioned, some automakers make them do well. I mean, Consumer Reports has done a number of stories on CVTs. I actually looked it up, and back when we wrote it a couple of years ago, we said, automakers that don't do a great job of it are Nissan, for example. I think they've gotten better, but in the beginning they kind of drone on. One of the criticisms of CVTs is what they call motor boating. In other words, the engine has to go up to a high RPM, like on the highway as you're accelerating, and sometimes it seems like it stays there and it just goes and it just keeps going. We found that to be the case in a lot of Nissan's other automakers that do CVTs pretty well, include Honda and Subaru. So, Keith, I'm kind of in between. I don't hate CVTs like a lot of people do, but it definitely depends on the application.
Yeah, and also the CVT hybrid. Most of the time, you'll see hybrids with CVTs because of the fuel economy, but not all hybrids have CVTs. In fact, Honda had a few hybrids a few years ago. You could get a manual transmission still on them. But Jen, what do you think? Are you a CVT lover, hater? In between
I would say with Mike that when they're implemented well, I'm fine. I'm also one, and I've said this before, when I'm in a hybrid or an electric vehicle, I don't want to be reminded every moment that I'm in a hybrid or electric vehicle. And some manufacturers have gone so far as to simulate shifts, real geared shifts with their CVTs to make them seem more non-CVT-ish, if that's the right word. Yeah. They're kind of fake. But again, I think they've come a long way, to Mike's point.
But I mean, it is kind of our Consumer Reports duty to remind people that, like, most CVTs need inspections and special fluid changes. I mean, we advise owners to refer to the owner's manual for specific guidance and to keep records of related service. And make sure that you use CVT specific fluid, or you could risk some big headaches and some big repair bills down the road. So as with a lot of things, there's no free ride.
Yeah. And just a little bit of history. The first CVTs were actually from a Dutch car manufacturer named DAF. And that was in the 70s. That was many years ago. And they were put in some Volvos, and then it kind of languished for a while and came back with hybrids. So with that, thank you for sending your questions to us. I hope we've answered them and then some. Keep sending them to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Your questions, your opinions, send them along, and check out cr.org. You can find out all the cars that we've talked about today and even more information to answer all your questions. Thanks for talking cars with us, and we'll chat again soon.